Welcome to the Economy Magazine at I-24 News, where we provide a daily view on the world markets and the global economy. I'm Natalie Ehrlich. Well, coming up today, terror in the Holy Land, businesses on edge, and a startup in Cameroon offers cleaner streets and cleaner fuel. Let's start now with financial headlines. Well, Asian stocks advanced Thursday after weak U.S. economic data raised expectations that the Fed would delay hiking rates. Japan's Nikkei finished up around 1.1%, the Hang Seng up 2%, and the Shanghai up over 2.3%. European markets also higher on Thursday. By the afternoon, London's FTSE climbed almost 1%. Germany's DAX advanced 1.3%, and France's CAC higher 1.1%. Well, U.S. markets were also poised to be in positive territory at the open. In South Africa, thousands took to the streets of Johannesburg on Wednesday, protesting corruption in government and business. Demonstrators held placards with slogans reading, quote, "Corruption is crime, and corruption is attack on the poor." Well, local media in South Africa estimate that the country has already lost more than $37.4 billion over the past 2 decades due to corrupt deals in both the government and the private sector.
We are pursuing class struggle because class struggle is the only guarantee for change, is the only guarantee that can make sure that we defend gains and improve our condition. And the only class that can be able to do that is the working class and the poor.
German Chancellor Angela Merkel said Turkey plays a key role in solving Europe's migrant crisis, calling now for the EU to do more to help Ankara deal with the influx of refugees. Addressing the German Bundestag's lower house before attending an EU conference on Thursday, Merkel called for a joint European effort. Well, European Union leaders were set to discuss the refugee crisis at that summit, including increased aid to Turkey.
Meine Damen und Herren, ohne Zweifel eine
We won't be able to order and stem the refugee movement without working together with Turkey. That means that we must better support Turkey in caring for refugees and providing humanitarian aid.
China's economic growth is expected to fall below 7% in the third quarter for the first time since 2009. Leaders in Beijing have worked hard to contain fears about slowing growth, but now even the government concedes that the economy is contracting. Well, earlier this week, other disappointing reports on Chinese trade as well as inflation were recorded. Russia's economy is headed for further trouble. This according to the billionaire president of Russia's Rusal, the world's #2 producer of aluminum. In an interview with CNBC, he said the worst is yet to come for Russia. The World Bank already projects that Russia's economy will shrink a sharp 3.8% this year. In addition to international sanctions following its annexation of Crimea, Moscow has suffered from record low oil prices as well as an expensive interventionist foreign policy, most notably its campaign to prop up Bashar al-Assad in Syria. Moving now close to home, Israel remains on edge following a violent week of terror. The implications for the Palestinian economy is critical. Here's more in this next report.
With multiple knife attacks, a shooting, and a car ramming, Israel experienced a dark day on October 13th, amid worsening violence that has taken Israeli and Palestinian lives. The attacks continued further into the week. The Israeli government has begun closing off East Jerusalem neighborhoods and has juggled with the idea of closing down the movement of people and goods between Israel and the Palestinian territories.
In order to achieve peace, terrorism must stop, and real security arrangements must be implemented on the ground.
Such security restrictions would significantly impact the exchange of goods and could stifle an economy highly dependent on Israel. In fact, 3/4 of Palestinian trade happens with Israel. According to Israeli economists, between 20 and 25% of Palestinian revenues are created in Israel. Nearly 100,000 Palestinians from the West Bank regularly work on the other side of the Green Line, mainly in construction and renovations. Day-to-day work permits are already more difficult to obtain, and building sites are partially or completely suspended, especially in Jerusalem. Israeli settlements with industrial zones are also seeing activity restricted. Palestinians working in those areas are feeling the economic pinch as well, and this is on top of an above 20% unemployment rate for West Bank Palestinians. For Mahmoud Abbas, the weight is heavy. On top of ongoing accusations of corruption, He's anchored by a deficit to the tune of 11.9% of GDP. Public positions make up a massive portion of the workforce, $4 billion, or half of public spending. Without support from the international community, the local economy would collapse. For now, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has said he wants to avoid the closure of the West Bank. There is no doubt that the current escalation of deadly violence is cause for strengthening of security restrictions, which could lead to a potentially vicious cycle.
For insight on the latest round of violence and its impact on the local economies here, Hen Herzog, chief economist at BDO Consulting, joins us on set. Thank you very much for being with us.
Hi.
Well, how severe is this flare-up now having an impact on the businesses here, both Palestinian and Israeli?
Well, it really depends on the length and duration of the crisis. If the crisis will be able to be sustained in a relatively short time, a few weeks, less than a month, then I think the Israeli economy will be able to recover. However, if we are going to an ongoing crisis, like we had in the first intifada, the second intifada, then we're headed to a severe effect on the economy.
All right. Well, the tourism ministry recently released a statement minimizing the impact of this latest crisis that we've seen this week. How much of that is a PR stunt?
Well, I think it is true in the short term. In the short term, the tourism industry hasn't yet been impacted, but is starting to impact. And as the crisis continues and gets longer and longer, tourism levels will diminish. You have to remember that the tourism industry is just now beginning to recover from the crisis of the Tzuk Eitan war. We are hardly back to the we were hardly back to the levels of incoming tourists that we had before the Tzuk Eitan crisis, and I don't think we will be able to sustain another long crisis.
And that's from the protective edge war that we saw in the 2014 summer. Moving on here, though, you talk about duration. What about the short and long-term impacts on both the Israeli and Palestinian economies?
Yes. If we're talking about the Palestinian economy, of course, the impact is devastating because they are not able, the closure, the lack of employment, as we saw in the preceding documentary, the dependency of the Palestinian economy on the Israeli economy is tremendous. In terms of the Israeli economy, first we have the tourism industry, which is always the first to respond and the last to recover. And beyond that, we may see an effect on the investment level in the industry because companies are just now finalizing their budgets for the next year, for 2016, and in such environment, of course, investment level will diminish. And you have to remember the problem that the Israeli economy faces. We're coming into this crisis in a situation that the economy was fragile anyhow. Right. We don't have the cushions, the levels that we have in the second intifada that was in September 2000. We came from a high level of growth rate, the 2000-year boom, and we were able to sustain the crisis. Now we're coming to the situation that the economy was fragile in the first place, and we fear that the growth rate in 2016 in terms of growth per capita will be negative.
All right, so how resilient do you think that the economy can be under the situation that it was already soft to begin with?
That's right. That's our main problem. The starting point means that the economy is not very resilient to such crisis.
Right, and shocks to the economy. Well, let's speak a bit about stocks. What about the stock market here, the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange? Is it susceptible as well?
Well, you would be surprised to see that in relative terms, the Israeli Stock Exchange withheld this crisis in pretty strong way. And we always see it in the Israeli stock market. The political factor is not a critical factor that affects the stock market. It is used to those political turnarounds. The issue here is economic. If the stock exchange will see that the crisis is translated to economic slowdown, then we will see companies beginning to fear that of slowdown in sales, incomes, revenues, and we will see the stock market respond.
All right. Well, thank you very much for bringing this insight to us, Hen Herzog of BDO. Moving on now back to the creative world of startups. The streets and marketplaces of Cameroon's economic capital are notorious for being covered in food waste. But a local firm there has now found a way to transform the unwanted debris into eco-friendly fuel.
Every day, Alphonse and Cedric go around the markets in central Douala clearing food waste. Today, market stallholders have abandoned kilos of corn leaves, but one man's garbage is another's treasure.
We're collecting food waste for the preparation of organic charcoal. We do it every day.
The students and eco-entrepreneurs have developed a process for transforming the waste into fuel. Once they've gathered enough raw material, they head to their specialist recycling unit to begin the drying process.
We put the waste in at 105 degrees, and after a few minutes the leaves lose their moisture and are ready to be transformed into fuel.
Next, they char the material to cinders in an oven before soaking them in a mixture of water and white clay. The result is organic charcoal briquettes for cooking. Along with practical benefits, they also emit very little greenhouse gas.
It's a non-toxic, powerful charcoal. It doesn't produce smoke and doesn't blacken pots. So households will use less wire sponges and less briquettes, as this new fuel lasts longer than other charcoals on the market.
Demand is high for charcoal in Cameroon, and with much of it extracted from local mangrove trees, the environmental cost is rising. A kilo of briquettes costs less than traditional wood charcoal and is enough to cook 5 meals instead of 2.
I prefer the organic charcoal. It's effective, it's economical, it doesn't produce smoke, and it heats and cooks food just as well.
Chemit Ecology currently produces 1 tonne per month. But despite a bulging order book, Alphonse and Cedric admit that investment is needed to prevent this eco-project going up in smoke.
And now for Financial Bazaar, we are joined on set by Ayman Sekzek. So what'd you bring today?
Hi, Natalie. Well, today I have some. Well, let's start with some good news. Lufthansa.
Good news? It's possible?
Yes, a little bit of good news. It is possible in the Middle East sometimes. Lufthansa, the worldwide airline, is investing $3.4 billion in a premium service in the Middle East. So if you want to fly anywhere, Lufthansa will soon launch a premium 5-star service in Middle Eastern countries, introducing fancy food, very comfy seating, and all the perks that come with this. Now, of course, Lufthansa is doing this to combat Qatar Airways, the Emirates, the Etihad. These are extremely luxurious airlines that operate in the Middle East, and they're very, very heavy competition. So it will have its work cut out for it over the next 2 or 3 years or so, and it's investing a lot. But CEO of Lufthansa is very, very optimistic. He's saying they expect gains of $564 million annually from this new service. Wow. So a lot of people like to fly luxuriously in the Middle East.
So do you think that they have a chance here because they are competing with these very luxurious local airlines? So perhaps even people from Europe who want the true Arabian experience will choose those airlines instead.
That's right. It will be very, very tough competition. However, it's known that people in the Middle East with lots of money, who we discuss often here in this corner, do like their options, and the amounts of tickets that are being sold every year just keep on increasing. So there is room for more competition in this field, and the experience that the Middle Eastern airlines like Qatar Airways provide really is incomparable. It's a one-of-a-kind service, so for a European company to enter this very unique field in the airline business is very extraordinary. It will be very interesting to see how they'll do up against Qatar Airways, and especially what Qatar Airways will have planned to, out the competition.
Okay. Well, what else did you bring?
Well, the second one is maybe not such good news.
I figured.
Yes. Well, I have to balance it out for you. We're going to talk about Russia and its involvement in the Middle East. Of course, the war in Syria. Now, there are many, many terrible ramifications for this, but one of them is economic, and that's not been discussed too much. Now, Russia, of course, is an oil producer. It's not a main oil producer, but since it's the beginning of the war in Syria and the imposition of European sanctions, oil production has dropped dramatically, but the real concern is that Russia 2 years ago announced that it will create 2 sovereign funds and investment partnerships with Saudi Arabia and Iran, and already it got a commitment of about $10 and $7 billion respectively from these 2 countries. But the war in Syria...
Way to play up the tensions here, right?
That's right. So it looked very promising for a while, but since the beginning of the operation in Syria, these partnerships are really put at risk. Any country is not happy to invest $10 billion in projects in a different country that's in the middle of a war, of course. And the air campaign is ongoing. We know that Russia is increasing and escalating its airstrikes on Syria, so it doesn't look too good right now. So far, no one has withdrawn their money from these funds, but if the air campaign continues, Russia is likely to lose a lot of money over this from foreign countries.
Right, and certainly it's also having an impact on their economy because it's such an expense for them, all this interventionist policy here in the Middle East. We've also seen their activity in Ukraine as well.
Absolutely. So Russia is in trouble anyway, and we know this. The ruble is in trouble because of Ukraine, so it's not a good time.
Well, thank you very much for being with us. I'm in
Thank you, Natalie.
That wraps up our show today. Stay tuned every day here for all your business coverage. I'm Natalie Ehrlich. Thank you.